Anders, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me here at Director's Notes about your short film, Ivalu.
You're welcome.
What inspired you to create the short film from the graphic novel?
The graphic novel was just a wonderful graphic novel. It was a friend who recommended the book to me, and I asked her what the book was about, and she said incest. And I figured, obviously an important subject matter, but I'm not quite sure that I would be the right one to do a movie about incest. And but then I couldn't help myself. I went to buy a copy of the graphic novel, and she was right. It was really a beautiful graphic novel, and it was very poetic in the way it kind of um, dealt with nature and just a whole approach with images and the voiceover, which was also a big part of the graphic novel, was really poetic, and the structure on how everything was conducted and how that towards the end you really you realize what this is all about. It comes as such a big punch. There was just something there where I really felt it could do well for a short film. So, and then I shared it with my producers, and they felt similar, and the journey started.
I mean, it's an incredible film. I had to watch it twice because the first time I watched it, I mean, I was so absorbed in everything, and then that moment comes, and I think then I was
Yeah,
so distracted from sort of thinking about everything else in the film. So I immediately went and watched it again, and it almost it's almost heavier the second time, knowing what's coming,
yeah,
but
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
the
yeah.
structure that you've built around that. And one of the things I read, so you decided to change the ending. Why was that
Yeah.
decision made?
The graphic novel is really tough. The film itself is really tough, but the ending in the graphic novel is just merciless, or I don't know if that's a word in English, but it's very dark. Um, she basically, Ivalu, the younger sister, who's really the main character of the story, she's on a search for Ivalu, her older sister, who has disappeared. He finds her eventually in the end, but she has hung herself at the old army base. And also the grandmother wasn't a part of the graphic novel. So basically the graphic novel ends with the suicide of Ivalu, and then also we kind of have to face the fact that she's now going back to live with the father, and probably going to be victim number two in this family. So it was just very dark. I needed to have some kind of a little bit of a beam of light, or something that pointed in a direction that could at least address the fact that there might be something we can do about this to change it for those innocent kids. And so the grandmother became a part of our ending. So at least when we let go of Bibeluk in the end, we now know that she's going to live with her grandmother. Because I think a lot of when you talk to people who's trying to make a difference for these victims, it's a lot about community and other family members being able to spot these things, talk about them, address them. And so I think that was an important part of the story also. And at least it did shine a little brighter light towards the future that Pipaluk was going to have. So yeah, I think that's always important for me, at least, that but of course it couldn't come across as naive. It had to be kind of, it had to be balanced.
There's a beautiful balance because it's been told through a child's point of view, but it's dealing
Yeah.
with such a horrific subject. How were you able to, I guess, balance that you're talking about the importance, but there's an innocence in her sort of search as well?
I have done a couple of short films about alcoholic parents. Um, and I always, when I do these films, I tend to not want to give the parent too many nuances. I really want to, on purpose and full intention, to portray them as monsters, because there's a reason why they're acting like they're doing, but I'm not so interested in trying to understand and tell a story of why they're doing this, because there's really no excuse. So therefore, my films are always very much on the children's point of view, and very much so here in this one. And I think also when you dig into this, a lot of these girls or boys, mostly girls, but they feel a lot of shame, and I think more than half of them feel like it's their fault.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's why they don't go and talk to neighbors or grandmothers, because they feel like they might be part of, why it's taking place in the first place. So that in itself is devastating. So by telling it from a kid's perspective, obviously, really hope this movie will reach some of these victims, and they will feel seen, and they will feel like maybe it can help to lift off some of the weight on their shoulders. And I mean, it might be a little bit of a naive hope, but I really do hope that in that capacity, the movie can also be helpful. So for me, it's a kid's told to children, and through the perspective and eyes of a child who feel obviously very lonesome and afraid.
Yeah. I think, you're talking about it wanting to reach an audience. I think that you've chosen to tell it from the child's perspective. It makes it a lot more accessible for audiences. So I really do. And it's a unique point of view as well. So that's phenomenal. Well done.
Thank you.
How did you find, because talking about sort of the shame and the gravitas of this situation, you're entering into sort of an indigenous small community. How were you able to work with your cast and work with people on this subject matter?
It was very difficult because, we obviously have a very close relationship at Denmark and Greenland, but we also have a rather complicated relationship since we colonized Greenland many years ago. And, and Greenland obviously are fighting to become much more, self-controlling and so on and so on. So I said to my two producers, I mean, there's no way in hell that we're going to go to Greenland and do this movie unless we're going to do this with a Greenlandic production company. And because the movie is in Greenlandic, I don't speak Greenlandic. It's an entire Greenlandic crew except for my DP, and also I have a co-director, Ivalu, who's a great, strong voice herself in Greenland. And and to be honest, for some time, it didn't seem like it was going to work out with them. They were not that keen. They loved the story. They liked me, and all good intentions, but they were not really keen on doing this. It took a lot of conversations to get to a point where we could actually do this together. And so it was very delicate matter. And then, of course, working in a different language, I learned is much more difficult than I expected, because I thought I could just direct from being able to tell, just from intent. But there were definitely times where the tone and the music of the Greenlandic language is so different to Danish, where I felt like the take was wonderful and right spot on. And my co-director, people would look at me going like, no, it's totally awful. And so I was in deep water here, and very much relying also on her to help me and direct and talk to the kids. Then, of course, they could speak English and partly Danish, but still, it was difficult for sure.
Yeah. One of the things as well, talking about difficulties of shooting something like that, is you've got the most stunning aerial shots and landscape shots, and I can't imagine it's the most sort of the easiest place to film. Like, what equipment did you have? What cameras did you have to use to capture everything?
Yeah, my DP has his own cameras, Canon, but Canon cameras and old Russian lenses. So, and most of these modern cameras, of course, can be used in even the coldest circumstances. So that wasn't really a problem, but obviously the weather was hard to predict. Especially we shot this film in October, so we had to plan for a lot more shooting days than what we ended up using. We were very lucky because in October normally the weather can change in 20 minutes from sunshine to totally overcast and snowy. But we were quite lucky. Things really worked in our advantage, and we didn't really have much trouble with the surroundings or the circumstances. For me, it was just a gift that kept giving, and because no matter no matter where you would point the camera, it just looked stunning.
Yeah.
Of course, at the very end, we had 2 days at the bottom of the ice cape, and that freaked me out a little bit because we were walking on ice, and we were also walking on thin ice. But we had a very old and experienced Greenlandic local guy who would take us to the ice, and he said he was talking ice because the ice makes a lot of noise,
Yeah.
really a lot of noise. When you can hear the whole entire ice cape talking, it's like you feel like a volcano is going to explode. That's how much it moves around and makes, and so it freaks you out. And he would also sometimes go like, "Don't walk there and don't walk there." So you had to really rely on his ability to find a way where nobody would fall into the water or fall through thin ice.
Yeah.
That freaked me out a little bit, being a city boy.
That's a big difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt as well, maybe like you said, you were lucky with the weathers, but upon first viewing, I felt it seems to cover so many different seasons. Because you've
Yeah.
got the girls, when they're picking berries, you've got them out on the water fishing, and then you've got the real harsh kind of, it felt like full winter. So I don't know, for me, it felt like it was shot over, a whole range of months and seasons, which is incredible.
And we were lucky because in Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, we had sunshine most of the time. So we could do all these flashbacks and things that would make it feel like it was different timelines. And then when we went to the ice cape, that's an entirely different place.
Mm.
It's further up north. And there, of course, the weather would change. It became colder. And as soon as you're standing surrounded by ice mountains and glaciers, and then obviously it looks very exotic and very different from the locations we could find around Nuuk. But it's shot within 11 days. So
Wow,
it's
that's
not
impressive.
like we came back over multiple times to shoot different periods of the year. It was just, we travel a little bit.
Yeah. And what about, I mean, the colors are beautiful because you've got the stark landscape, you've got sort of the bright colors with the, especially the outfits that they wear that obviously speaks so much to the pain and everything. I feel that you balanced that really well within the story. What was the color palette? What were you looking for when you were making the film?
Really a lot of colors because I think the strength of the graphic novel was when you just kind of glance through the graphic novel, it's the colors are so bright and the blue on the sky is so bright, and it kind of stands very much in contrast to that darkness that the girls find themselves within. So I thought that was really an interesting move in, being so happy and so childlike in the color palette. So that was definitely something that was a big part of trying to find visual language for this film to stand in contrast. Obviously, the weather changes a little bit, like you said, as we go deeper into the story. First and foremost, of course, the nature becomes colder and more, icy, and that, of course, reflects also on Pippa Luke's inner kind of feelings that she's getting more and more lonely and more disattached, or whatever you call it, to civilization, and find herself very much by herself. So the nature is a character in this film, and something that plays very much towards in trying to explain how she feels on the inside. And I thought that was a very bold move in the graphic novel, and something we definitely chased in the adaptation here.
Mm. And then what about, you spoke earlier about the flashbacks and the different montages. How did you work in post-production to put them into the structure that we see?
Yes, I mean the editing was endless on this one, because you could have, I tell you, you could really have edited this movie in many different ways, because I kind of looked at this movie. It's definitely very different from the movies that I've done before, in the sense that to me it feels more like visual poem,
Okay.
and the music is so much in the voiceover and the Greenlandic language. It's almost like a meditation, and that never really becomes. When you set out to meditate, it's in order to find peace, but and then in this one, it kind of goes in the other direction. But so for me, it was really trying different paths in the editing room, and it took I've never spent so much time on a short film in editing, because you have three different timelines. So that was a challenge. And then, of course, we also had to figure out a way to incorporate the raven. The raven is such a big part of the
Yeah.
film, and becomes, a symbol of, nature basically showing her the way, or showing her the answers, or helping her to find the answers. She basically she finds this raven at her window still, in a dream, and then it asks her follow her into the nature, and in the morning when she wakes up, the raven is still out there, and she decides to follow the raven, and basically the raven shows her to where Pipaluk is.
Yeah.
Or to where Ivalu is. That was, with a short film budget, because we didn't have much money to do this film. It was definitely something we had to figure out a way to do.
You've got,
um,
there's so many different elements all in there together. And I
yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to ask you about the mythology. Why,
yeah.
you included that in the story.
The mythology was also an addition to the film. It wasn't in the graphic novel, but researching about Greenland, obviously you learn that nature is a big part of how they see life and how they live life, but also their mythology is something they live by.
Mm.
And there was this great myth about the mother of the sea, which is basically a myth about greed and balance in the universe. So the mother of the sea is at the bottom of the sea, and she will steal all the food from the sea if people don't, behave and live a balanced life.
Mm.
And in this story, I felt like it could add to the poetry of the visuals, and also to the fact that Ivalu, yes, she sacrifices herself in the end. She dies, but she doesn't die by, she hasn't hung herself like in the graphic novel. She basically, we see her alive when she dives down at the end of the film. She dives down to the mother of the sea in order to calm the hair
Yeah.
of the mother of the sea, in order to reestablish a balanced universe where hopefully her younger sister can live a better life. And I thought it was very beautiful too, because that for me talks into the sisterhood
Mm.
and the willingness for Ivalu to really go, really try and help and make for a better world for her younger sister, even though that Ivalu doesn't feel like she has a place in the world anymore, or she can't. She has just seen too much, horrific things for her to want to stay here. But at least she wants to try and do something for her sister, and we use the myth for exactly that. So it becomes a little bit like a fable towards the end. And I've worked that way before. I really love to use fantasy, and the way kids specifically are using fantasy almost like it's a real world. Um, for me, that kind of for me it feels more personal, and it's more in line with how I like to see the world through the eyes of children.
Yeah. And it brings it, I think, you know, when you were talking as well about changing the ending, it does, it gives it more of an uplifting beat, more of a
Yeah,
less desolate, I guess, would be the
yeah,
word I'd
for
use.
sure.
So, what does everybody think about the Oscar nomination?
Everybody is over the moon, I guess. It's great. I hadn't seen this coming. I mean, I tried it a couple of years back, but and with the Oscars, before it happened 9 years ago, I thought it would never happen, and then it happens, and then you think, wow, that's a once in a lifetime, and now I can slowly, just live a happy life, and then so really, really surprised that we're now back again. Just really happy and really proud on behalf of the crew who did this film, and especially very proud of the two girls,
Yeah,
because it takes quite some bravery in a small community like Nuuk and Greenland to put your face to a film this political. And so I'm just so happy that the film ended up in a good place,
mm,
because obviously the Oscars is an expression of love for the film. So because they it was really courageous of them to be in the film. So
yeah,
it feels really nice, especially on behalf of everybody who did it.
brilliant. So, what about you? What are you working on now? What's next?
I just closed editing on my second feature, but my first feature was an American one a couple of years back, and we just going into sound now, and that will be out later this year in September, hopefully. And then writing on a couple of other features. No, I haven't any short films in the making, but I think I've done quite a lot now. I think
Yeah,
must be my seventh short movie, Ivalu.
okay. And what for you?
But I love the format, though. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not that I don't see myself do another short one day. I really love the format, even though people tend to look at it as something for first timers. Or I think it's a great playground to do short films.
I think you're able to express a lot more and to talk
Yeah,
about the kind of subjects and these big issues. I think short film is such a fantastic vehicle for that.
yeah,
And I think in
I
Ivalu,
agree.
you've really embodied that.
Yeah, totally agree. It's you can really dive into some subject matters that would be very hard to get financed in the long format.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Well,
so
brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I'm going to watch your film
so
again.
nice to talk to you.